Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. Two can be as bad as one. It's the loneliest number since the number one. No is the saddest experience you'll ever know. Yes, it's the saddest experience you'll ever know. This one is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. One loneliest number is worse than two. It's just no good anymore since she went away. Now I spend my time just making rhymes of yesterday. Number one is the loneliest. Number one is the loneliest. Number one is the loneliest number that you ever do. One is the loneliest number. One is the loneliest number. One is the loneliest number that you ever do. It's just no good anymore since she went away. Now I spend my time just making rhymes of yesterday. Number one is the loneliest. 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 Number one is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. One is the loneliest. Number one is the loneliest. Number one is the loneliest number that you'll ever do.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. We missed you.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So good morning, Speakeasy. And today's topic is about oneness. And the conversation that Rev Celeste is stirring up is to get us thinking so we can all add our voices. So your voices are welcome. After Kathy's last song, we hang out, we have a conversation. So, let me introduce Reverend Celeste A Frazier. She has been the minister of 3 different Science of Mind churches. She was the lead minister of the Center for Spiritual Living, the Power of Oneness, the Spiritual Center, the DuPage Center of Spiritual Living, both in the Chicago area. And also she finished her call to pulpit over at the East Bay Church of Religious Science in Oakland, California. So she's back in Chicago, and this is another thing that we get to celebrate. Celeste is our guest speaker, facilitator across the country, including many religious science centers, unity centers, and new thought centers, and has presented at regional and international conferences. She's an ordained minister. Rev Celeste regularly facilitates vision workshops with churches, as well as individuals and corporations. In fact, she just led one for my sister's group in Virginia, and they were like, "What just happened?" Like, you gave us something we didn't even know we needed. That was what they said about Reverend Celeste. And I was like, I know. She teaches many spiritual transformative courses and workshops. She's going to be at Speakeasy teaching for us. Super excited. She has written books. She's been an actor. She still is acting. This I'm super excited about, actually, because, Speakeasy, somebody called it a church the other day. And I was like, I know that that's the word that we use because that's the word that we fit into. But I think of our community more of as a spiritual theater, as a theater community. Because when I went to church and I was raised in a very religious community, they told me what not to do. But when I went to theater, they told me what I could be. And they modeled it for me on the stage. For me, I've had so many healings, both being on stage as an actor as well as in the audience. I love Reverend Celeste phrase that she gave me the other day, edutainment. And she and I sit shoulder to shoulder, I think, in the realization and recognition that art is so healing and powerful. It's a strong card in my deck. In fact, I believe Speakeasy is, spirituality and creativity married. So I'm grateful that we have this amazing speaker with us here today. Please give it up for Reverend Celeste Frazier.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Maureen. I really appreciate the generosity of your spirit and welcoming me into this platform again. And so I have been recommitted again to the course. That's because whenever I need some support in terms of forgiveness work, Spirit lets me know. And Spirit let me know, well, you need to go back to doing the course, just because you took like a break for 6 months or 5.5 months or whatever. And as soon as I did, and this happens every time I reconnect with the course, is that it's just like lock and load, baby. It's like, I'm like engaged in the flow, because of the special relationship that I have with it. It always brings exactly the right words to meet whatever my situation, circumstance, or condition may be. And this is no exception. So when I fell into give me your blessing, Holy Son of God, I was being with, yes, it is definitely time for a blessing. Yes, it is definitely time for something to renew, refresh, revitalize, and restore me and all of life, all of the people who are in tune with me and who are listening to me and who are watching me. And so, also, Holy Son of God, I wanted to really be with that a little bit deeper, because when I'm listening to Holy Son of God, sometimes people are limiting that to one person, to a person that is in the Jesus Christ. But I'm embracing it as my Christhood. I'm embracing it as my place where I am connected with the source and substance of my life that I call God. And so as I know it for me, I know it for everyone. And so as I was being with that and meditating on that, I started noticing the many ways that the course invites us to look into our own minds. Because it says, there's temptation that'll come, but there's always an offering for more room to love. And, that is what I think this is really being called for right now in so many ways. At first it was the quarantine of the COVID-19 that was calling us to get still, be still and know. And not getting busy outside with all of the plethora of activities that we can find to do, that we make it so much about doing that we forget who we be. And so in the process of all of that, what happened is when we stopped all of our activity, the skies started clearing up, the water started clearing up, the earth started blossoming. And we become so keenly aware of our interconnectedness of this thing called life. Helping to promote our own lives. We're helping to promote life in nature, life in animals. The animals were coming out to play and they were like, hey, those other things are not around. We get to be who we truly are now, right? And so, and people started saying, oh, well, I noticed that I can see the bottom of Lake Michigan. I couldn't see it before. And, people are saying we can see the Himalayas. People haven't seen those for like 40 years. And so the more and more we become aware of how interconnected we are, the more we cannot have the option to deny oneness. And so oneness does not mean sameness, but oneness means that we are one. And God, in all of his magnificence, if you could exhaust God, God would not be God. And so the many possibilities that there are for God to express, it expresses through each one of us. And as it does so, it comes in different colors. It comes in different sizes. It comes in different shapes. It comes in different belief systems. It comes in different mindsets. It comes in different thoughts. And what we need to be reminded of is that what the Course tells us, the mind in and of itself is abstract. And so if you notice any abstract painting or any abstract way of being, I'll say, then you'll know that it's always a choice of how we interpret one thing or another. And so here, in these times when we are in the midst of an uprising, and what I'm calling a revolution that is being televised, is that we're able to see that, yes, there is injustice that is being broadcast, and it has been broadcast, but it has not begun with George Floyd. It did not begin with Breonna. It did not begin with Ahmaud Arbery. It did not begin with Trayvon Martin. It did not begin in Minneapolis before with Philando. It did not begin with Sandra Bland in Dallas. It did not begin at any of those points. You know, it did not begin in the 20th century or the 19th century or the 18th century. We have been choosing as a people, we have been choosing to make ourselves more important than another being. And then I'm going to talk about, you know, how wars get started. It's because one person thinks that they're entitled to have more than another person, and so the conquering begins. And the issue began when people thought that having dominion over the earth meant dominion over everything on the earth. But dominion really means responsibility, which is a responsibility to be able to see what the condition is and support its growth. Not unlike in Finhorn, when the people took so many measures to try to make the vegetation grow, and unless and until they stopped and listened to the plants that were there in Finland, did they learn what the plants were asking them to do. And it's still flourishing after decades. And so this is the same kind of thing that we need to do with one another so that we can have the blessing of each other. You know, when you go into divide and conquer mindset, and, you know, we have a politician who likes to do that, who's very prominent. But when we go into a divide and conquer mindset, what happens is that we lose the benefit, we lose the blessing of being together. And so here we are with the protest of this is unjust, this is not good, this is not humane, this is despicable, this is awful, whatever words that you put behind watching Chauvin lay his knee on George Floyd's neck as if George were a deer that he was waiting to let the life seep out of in 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And for those of you who viewed that and who were watching that process occur, it was devastating because, number one, you know, George Floyd was not a criminal. He was not in the midst of any criminal activity. The accusation was forgery. You know, I had a friend of mine go to pick up a pizza for us one time, and she handed the people $100 bill, and they were like, "Oh, this is not real. This is counterfeit." And you know, she was like, "I just got this from the bank," and it was like, why would you assume that because she was a Black woman that she wouldn't be able to have $100 bill? You know, like, would anybody else been able to come into that pizzeria and give $100 bill and have the same response? And so what people don't understand is that this has been our experience as Black people for all of our lives. When I noticed that there was something in this world that I was separate from, I was about 8 years old, and my mother taking me over to my cousin's house and it happened to be on Halloween, and I didn't have a costume, so they dressed me up like a bum. And I don't know if we didn't have enough candy or what it was. All my other cousins were older than me. I was just following them because I was the youngest. And they decided to cross the bridge. Well, when they decided to cross the bridge, we were now in what was considered to be a white neighborhood at that time. And so, ding dong, trick or treat, niggas go back to your own neighborhood was the response from behind the door. And so there at 8 years old, I was able to discover that there was some denial that I was given. I was really hurt because I knew that meant no candy. But it meant more than that for my older cousin who had commenced to start cussing. You know, and so, because I think he was probably maybe about 18, maybe he was like 17 or something like that. I think he's about 9 years older than me. But, you know, so I realized then that there are people that don't see us in a way that is whole. And so all of the rhetoric around making America great again has some implications that none of us are really absolutely aware of, but it appears to be some kind of a dog whistle. So yeah, so you know, in this awareness of separation, what is occurring is that people are now trying to figure out, how did we come apart? What happened here? Because for a lot of white people, the conversations that I've been having is that they didn't realize that, you know, that this racism was so prevalent. I was telling people on Facebook, I did a film like 27 years ago on police brutality that I was getting funded. I was getting funded like $4.5 million out of Canada, but I couldn't get US distribution because they didn't want to talk about it. Okay. And since then, there's been thousands of videos explaining that, yes, this police brutality is real. But what else is real is a mindset that a lot of people are awakening to that they hadn't awakened to before, which has to do with a certain amount of entitlement. And so when you hear the word privilege, people sometimes respond and say, well, I'm not privileged, my family struggled. But the privilege that is being talked about is the advantages that you have to even be able to deny that you have privilege. And so what we're experiencing as Black people on a day-by-day basis is reduced resources. We don't necessarily, as a whole group, have intergenerational wealth, because when slaves became sharecroppers and started to be able to have their own piece of property after the Emancipation Proclamation and Juneteenth, which is coming up on Friday. You know, until that happened, there was no owning of property for people who were of African descent. And so what happened is, if they got harassed by, a white person who was anti-Black, then they might destroy the house. They might do something that the mother might feel was in danger of their children, and it probably was, because I've heard all kinds of stories. But then the Black father then has to decide, do I hold on to my property or do I hold on to my family? And so I don't know that that's ever been a white experience for you to be placed in a position to have to make those choices. But this has been our experience for centuries. But the Course says one brother is all brothers. And I'm extending that to say one sister is all sisters. And so because the one mind contains all minds, then we do have the capacity to understand each other. We do have the capacity to be able to be in sync with one another. And so what's being called for in the blessing is that we all embrace our oneness with God. And as we embrace our oneness with God, we cannot help but to embrace our oneness with each other, because God doesn't separate us. It doesn't seem to be, well, I only care about these people and not those people. It doesn't seem to be that I only want these people to prosper and thrive and not those people, okay? But to be able to bless all of life is what God does. And so anytime we try to prevent something, if we think that we're going to get more, so that if we have a fear of not having enough and we try to keep it from someone else, it's the same thing that we're doing when we are conquering each other in wars, when we're trying to exert our opinion over somebody else's way of life or somebody else's way of thinking. And it's a great opportunity now for us to just want to be in dialogue with each other so that we can really be able to hear each other, like in Fenhorn, to really be able to hear what the needs are in order to be able to grow, to hear what the needs are and able to be able to flourish. And so we're knowing that even though the body, may be limiting our freedom in some way, in terms of what the Course is saying, the body is that race consciousness, and by race consciousness, I mean all the thoughts that have ever been thought throughout time. And so these old values need to be falling away so that the real and essential values, the relevant values, can come to the forefront. But the bodies are a symbol, the Course says, for a form of fear. So the invitation is for us to release our fear, for us to release any kind of us and them, because anybody who seeks to provoke a race war, and I don't believe that we're looking to have a race war, but there are certain provocations by certain dog whistles, by a certain person who is sending signals that bring people into activities that are destructive. We in the community don't have access to jackhammers to be able to bust down brick buildings. What people have placed bricks nearby, and next thing you know, people are throwing bricks through windows. And so there is a concerted effort to make things appear a certain way that are not so. And so what I'm inviting us to do is to allow ourselves to just settle into the awareness of this presence that's never an absence, so that we can really be able to see each other and feel each other and hear each other, because we can get to grow together in a way that can flourish, in a way that we can truly thrive together. And this is the blessing that our Christhood can give us. This is the blessing that we've been seeking. And this is the blessing that we are entitled to as expressions of the one. Thank you, and namaste.
Thank you, and namaste. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, we're going to have another song from Kathy, and then we'll have a few announcements, and then we'll have a conversation. I just feel like a lot of people want to share a lot of stuff and ask you a lot of questions, and I really appreciate your talk, and I'll pass it over to you, Kathy.
Yes, thank you so much, Reverend Celeste. It's always wonderful to have you and to have your voice, especially now as we're going through all of this and people are getting woke, finally. And my hope is that this ripping off of the Band-Aid is just gonna shine so bright a light on this issue that it gets healed once and for all, or the cockroaches can go scurrying back to wherever they were hiding before and stay there for forever, as far as I'm concerned. All right.
Is it getting better? Do you feel the same? Will it make it easier on you now? You got someone to blame. You say one love, one life, when it's one day in the night. One love, we get to share it. It leaves you, baby, if you don't care for it. Did I disappoint you? Leave a bad taste in your mouth? You act like you never had love, and you want me to go without. Well, it's too late tonight to drag the past out into the light. We're one, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other, carry each other one. Have you come here for forgiveness? Have you come to raise the dead? Have you come here to play Jesus? To the lepers in your head? Or did I ask too much? More than a lot? You gave me nothing, now it's all I got. We're one, but we're not the same. We hurt each other, then we do it again. You say, love is a temple, love a higher law. Love is a temple, love the higher law. You ask me to enter, but then you make me crawl. And I can't be holding on to what you got. And all you got is hurt. One love, one blood, one life. You got to do what you should. One life with each other.
Thank you. Woohoo! Woohoo!
Woo.
Thank you. Perfect song. You've got such a beautiful heart. And you know what? God must have kissed us on the lips because that sounded perfect. It wasn't going in and out.
Yay, awesome.
I know. So
Kamala for VP.
this message is brought to you by Kathy Richardson.
Got my Kamala action figure on the altar. I'm making this happen, people.
All right.